Easy prey becomes deadly hunter. Commander Vorthik stretched his 4 muscular arms as he studied the holographic display floating before his command chair. His reptilian eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he counted the targets. 15 massive cargo haulers moved in a lazy formation through the Nexus shipping lane, their hulls gleaming with the dull metal finish typical of commercial vessels. Only 2 escort ships accompanied them, small frigates that looked ancient by galactic standards. Perfect hunting, Vorthik hissed to his bridge crew, his forked tongue tasting the recycled air of his flagship, the Bloodfang. 15 cargo ships, probably loaded with rare earth metals from the human mining colonies. And look at those pathetic escorts. His weapons officer, a scarred Zalfin warrior named Grix, leaned forward eagerly. Commander, those escort ships appear to be using outdated propulsion systems. Their energy signatures are barely registering on our sensors. Should we power up the plasma cannons? Vorthik's laugh was a grating sound that echoed through the bridge. The Zalfin pirate fleet had terrorized this sector for 3 cycles, and no convoy had ever escaped their ambush. His 7 attack cruisers were state-of-the-art vessels, each one capable of tearing apart a dozen civilian ships. The humans were newcomers to galactic trade, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They were soft, weak, creatures who relied too heavily on diplomacy instead of strength. Signal the fleet, Vorthik commanded, settling back into his throne-like chair. We drop from hyperspace in standard attack formation. Target the escorts first, then round up the cargo ships for boarding. I want those humans to know they're dealing with real warriors. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, 7 Zalfin cruisers materialized from hyperspace in a perfect arc around the human convoy. Their dark hulls bristled with weapon arrays, and their shields glowed with contained plasma energy. To any observer, it would have looked like a pack of predators surrounding helpless prey. Vorthik opened a communication channel to the human ships, his universal translator converting his words into the strange musical language humans used. Human vessels, you are surrounded by the Zalfin Brotherhood. Surrender your cargo and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and we will turn your ships into scrap metal floating in the void. The response came from one of the escort ships designated as use Phantom on their scanners. The voice was calm, almost pleasant, with what Vorthik's translator indicated was a female human speaker. Zalfin vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. You are interfering with lawful commerce in neutral space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The entire Zalfin bridge erupted in laughter. Consequences? From 2 ancient escort ships and a convoy of unarmed cargo haulers? Vorthik had never heard anything so amusing. Consequences? Vorthik roared into the communicator. Little human female, you have 2 choices. Surrender now or watch your precious cargo ships burn. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your escort ships wouldn't last 10 seconds against one of my cruisers. I appreciate the warning, Captain Chun replied, her voice still maddeningly calm. But I'm afraid I have to decline your generous offer. Phantom and Ghost, this is Sarah. Condition read. Engage Protocol 7. Vorthik's amusement turned to confusion as the 2 human escort ships suddenly changed course. Instead of fleeting or moving to protect the cargo vessels, they accelerated directly toward his fleet. Their energy signatures began fluctuating wildly, readings jumping across his sensors in patterns that made no sense. What are they doing? Grix snarled, his claws clicking nervously against his control panel. Their power levels are spiking, but I can't lock onto them with targeting systems. It doesn't matter, Vorthik snapped. They're committing suicide. All ships, open fire. Destroy those escorts. 7 Zalfin cruisers unleashed their full weapon arrays simultaneously. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and kinetic projectiles streaked through space toward the approaching human ships. The display should have been spectacular. 2 small vessels disintegrating under overwhelming firepower. Instead, something impossible happened. The weapons passed right through the human ships as if they weren't there. Plasma bolts that should have melted hull plating simply continued into empty space. Particle beams designed to disrupt molecular bonds had no effect. Even the kinetic projectiles, solid chunks of dense metal traveling at tremendous velocity, sailed harmlessly through the escort vessels without causing any damage. "Report!" Vorthik screamed, his confident demeanor cracking. "What just happened?" "Unknown, Commander," his science officer stammered, all 6 of his eyes focused on scrolling data streams. The human ships appear to be phasing in and out of normal space. Their quantum signatures are fluctuating between dimensions. I've never seen technology like this. The 2 human escorts continued their approach, seemingly unaffected by the massive firepower directed at them. As they drew closer, Vorthik could see that their hulls were doing something disturbing. The metal surfaces rippled and shifted, like liquid mercury flowing over an invisible framework. Sometimes the ships appeared solid and normal. Other times, they became translucent, ghostly outlines that his eyes struggled to focus on. "Stealth technology," Grix whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "But not like anything in our databases. They're not just hiding from sensors. They're hiding from reality itself." Captain Chun's voice came over the communication. "Channel again," still maintaining that infuriating calm tone. "Zalthan Fleet, you've just witnessed a demonstration of human adaptive stealth systems. Your weapons cannot harm us while we're phased. However, ours can certainly harm you. Last chance to withdraw." Vorthik's pride wouldn't allow him to retreat, even in the face of technology he didn't understand. "All ships maintain attack formation. Use tractor beams. If we can't shoot them, we'll capture them." The Zalfin cruisers extended powerful tractor beam arrays, attempting to lock onto the human escorts with gravitational fields. For a moment, it seemed to work. The U.S. Phantom slowed slightly, caught in overlapping tractor beams from 3 different cruisers. Then the human ship did something that violated every principle of physics Vorthik thought he understood. It split apart. The single escort vessel suddenly became 5 identical ships, each one breaking free from the tractor beams and accelerating in different directions. But these weren't separate ships, Vorthik realized with growing horror. They were quantum duplicates, probability ghosts made temporarily solid. Each one was equally real and equally dangerous. "Impossible," his science officer moaned. "They're manipulating quantum states on a macro level. The energy requirements alone should tear their ships apart." The 5 Phantom copies of the U.S. Phantom opened fire simultaneously. But their weapons weren't like anything in Vorthik's experience. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they launched what appeared to be small, dark spheres that moved through. Space-like drops of liquid night. When the spheres struck the Zalfin cruisers, they didn't explode. They absorbed. Each impact point became a spreading circle of absolute darkness that consumed everything it touched. Hull plating, weapons arrays, even the plasma energy from the shields, all disappeared into the growing black spots as if they had never existed. "Controlled singularities," Grix gasped, watching his weapon systems vanish into nothingness. "They're using miniature black holes as ammunition." The second human escort, U.S. Ghost, chose that moment to reveal its own capabilities. The ship suddenly expanded, its hull unfolding like an intricate piece of origami. What had appeared to be a simple frigate transformed into something far more complex and menacing. Weapon ports opened along hidden panels, revealing arrays of devices that didn't match any known technology in the galactic databases. But the most disturbing aspect of the Transformation was the sound. Somehow, impossibly, the ghost was broadcasting audio through the vacuum of space itself. Music filled the void, a thunderous composition of drums and electronic harmonies that seemed to resonate directly in the minds of everyone listening. It wasn't just heard. It was felt, a rhythm that synchronized with heartbeats and triggered primal responses across species barriers. Psychological warfare, Vorthik realized, feeling his own pulse quicken to match the alien beat. They're affecting our neurological functions. The music wasn't random. As it built to a crescendo, the human cargo ships began to move. What Vorthik had assumed were helpless civilian vessels suddenly displayed coordination and precision that rivaled military formations. They weren't running or hiding. They were repositioning themselves into a complex three-dimensional pattern that surrounded the Zalfin fleet. "Commander," his communications officer called out, his voice strained with fear. "I'm receiving transmissions from all 15 cargo ships. They're not cargo vessels, sir. They single quotes . They're military transports, troop carriers." As if responding to his words, the sides of the nearest human cargo ship began to open. Instead of revealing holds full of mining equipment or trade goods, the ship disgorged hundreds of small craft. They poured out like a metallic waterfall, each one no larger than a fighter, but moving with purpose and intelligence that suggested advanced artificial intelligence. These weren't drones in any conventional sense. As they spread through space around the trapped Zalfin fleet, they began to change. Some grew additional weapon mounts. Others extended sensor arrays or communication relays. A few actually merged together, forming larger, more specialized units. They were adapting in real time, becoming exactly what the tactical situation required. Vorthik watched in growing dread as the small craft began to demonstrate capabilities that defied everything he thought he knew about space combat. They moved in perfect synchronization, like a flock of birds or a school of fish, but with mathematical precision. When his remaining weapons tried to target them, they anticipated the attack and moved to avoid it before his gunners had even pulled the triggers. "Sir," Grix reported, his voice barely controlled, "they're hacking our targeting computers. Not through our communication systems, but through quantum entanglement. They're reading our intentions directly from our ship's AI systems." The human drones weren't just avoiding attacks. They were learning from them. Each time a Zalfin weapon fired, the small craft analyzed the energy signature, the targeting algorithm, and the weapon's physical limitations. By the third volley, they had developed countermeasures. By the fifth, they were using the Zalfin weapon's own energy against them, somehow redirecting plasma bolts and particle beams back at their sources. Captain Shun's voice cut through the chaos once again, but this time there was steel beneath. The diplomatic tone. "Commander Vorthik, you and your fleet are now completely surrounded and outmatched. Your weapons are ineffective against our ships. While ours have demonstrated their ability to disable yours without permanent damage, you have one chance to avoid complete destruction. Power down your weapons and prepare to receive boarding parties." "Never," Vorthik snarled, though he could feel his confidence crumbling. The Zalfin Brotherhood does not surrender to inferior species. Inferior? For the first time, Captain Shun's voice carried a note of amusement. "Commander, you just attacked what you thought was a helpless convoy with overwhelming force. You threatened to murder civilian traders for their cargo. You boasted about turning peaceful ships into scrap metal. And now you call us inferior?" The UE's Phantom and Ghost moved closer, their quantum-shifted hulls making them appear to flicker in and out of existence. The swarm of adaptive drones tightened their formation around the Zalfin fleet, each small craft pulsing with energy that suggested imminent attack. "Let me explain something about humans, Commander," Captain Shun continued. "We don't start fights, but we always finish them. What you thought was weakness was actually restraint. What you mistook for inferior technology was actually adaptive superiority. And what you believed was an easy target was actually a carefully laid trap. Vorthik felt cold dread creeping up his spine as the implications became clear. A trap? Did you really think we weren't aware of your activities in this sector? Sean asked. We've been tracking your fleet for weeks. This convoy was specifically designed to draw you out. Every ship, every crew member, every piece of equipment was chosen for this exact scenario. You didn't find easy prey, Commander. You found professional soldiers doing their job. The Zalthan commander looked around his bridge at his crew, seeing his own fear reflected in their eyes. His mighty fleet, terror of the shipping lanes, had been reduced to sitting ducks by opponents he had dismissed as harmless weaklings. The humans hadn't just defeated them. They had made the Zalthan pirates look like amateurs. And this was only the beginning. When hunters become the hunted, the silence that followed Captain Sean's revelation stretched across space like a held breath. Commander Vorthik stared at the tactical display, watching hundreds of human drones maintain perfect formation around his fleet. Each small craft pulsed with contained energy, waiting for orders that could turn 7 proud Zalthan warships into debris in seconds. Commander, his science officer whispered, breaking the tense quiet, I'm analyzing the quantum signatures from their stealth systems. The energy output required for dimensional phasing should have burned out their power cores hours ago. Instead, their energy levels are increasing. Vorthik's reptilian features twisted into a grimace. What are you saying? I believe they're drawing power from subspace itself. They've turned the fabric of reality into a battery. It's theoretically possible, but the mathematical calculations alone would require computational power that exceeds our entire fleet's processing capacity. Captain Shun's voice cut through their whispered discussion. Commander Vorthik, I can hear your science officer's report through your ship's communication leak. He's partially correct. Human computational systems are indeed more advanced than your current models might suggest. But he's missed the more important point, which is, Vorthik forced himself to ask, though he dreaded the answer. We're not just using one ship's computer system. Every human vessel in this convoy is networked together, sharing processing power, tactical analysis, and predictive algorithms in real time. When you attack one of our ships, you're essentially fighting our entire fleet's collective intelligence simultaneously. To demonstrate her point, one of the human drones near Vorthik's flagship suddenly projected a holographic display into the space between the two fleets. The image showed a detailed schematic of every Zalthan ship, complete with structural weak points, weapon capabilities, crew complement, and even individual crew psychological profiles. We know that your weapons officer, Grix, has a tendency to overcharge plasma cannons when stressed, reducing their accuracy by 12%. Sean continued conversationally. Your navigation officer suffers from spatial disorientation in complex tactical situations, which is why your formation broke apart after our third maneuver. And you, Commander, have a psychological profile that indicates extreme pride combined with tactical inflexibility. That's why this trap worked so well. Vorthik felt his blood run cold. The humans hadn't just prepared for this encounter. They had studied his entire crew like specimens in a laboratory. Every decision he had made, every tactical choice had been anticipated and countered before he had even thought of it. You're wondering how we gathered such detailed intelligence, John said, apparently reading his thoughts. The answer is simple. Humans excel at one thing above all others: adaptation. We've been analyzing Zalthan pirate tactics for months, studying every attack, every battle pattern, every crew composition. We don't just react to threats. We evolve to counter them. The U.E.'s Ghost chose that moment to demonstrate human adaptive capability in the most unsettling way possible. The ship's hull began to flow like liquid metal, reshaping itself into a configuration that perfectly mirrored the design of Vorthic's own flagship. Within minutes, the human escort had transformed into an exact duplicate of the Bloodfang, complete with weapon arrays and shield generators. Molecular reconstruction, Vorthic's engineer gasped. They're using programmable matter on a scale that shouldn't be possible, but the ghost wasn't finished. As they watched in horrified fascination, the transformed ship began broadcasting on Zalthan military frequencies, using perfect reproductions of their own communication protocols. To any outside observer, it would appear that two identical Zalthan flagships were facing each other in space. Psychological warfare taken to its logical conclusion, Sean explained. We can become you, think like you, even predict your responses better than you can. But more importantly, we can choose not to. That's what separates civilized beings from pirates. The swarm of human drones suddenly began moving in complex patterns around the Zalthan fleet. Instead of attacking, they were performing what looked like an intricate dance, weaving between the larger ships with mathematical precision. As they moved, they left behind small devices that attached themselves to the Zalthan hulls with soft magnetic clicks. Asterisk. What are those? Grix demanded, trying to target the devices with point defense systems that refused to lock on. Gifts, Sean replied cheerfully. Each one contains a complete library of human art, literature, music, and scientific knowledge. Consider them cultural exchange presents. We believe that exposure to diverse perspectives tends to reduce violent tendencies over time. Vorthik stared at the small devices scattered across his ship's hull. These humans were so confident in their superiority that they were giving their enemies access to human culture and technology. It was either the most arrogant gesture he had ever witnessed, or the most terrifyingly generous. There's more, Sean continued. Those devices also contain detailed analyses of your ship designs, including recommendations for improving efficiency, reducing crew fatigue, and enhancing safety systems. Pirates or not, we'd prefer that you don't die from preventable accidents. The Zalthan commander felt something crack inside his chest. These humans had defeated his fleet absolutely, demonstrated technological superiority that bordered on the impossible, and then offered to help improve his ship's safety systems. It was like being conquered by a species of warrior philosophers who viewed violence as a last resort rather than a first choice. Why? He asked, his voice barely audible over the bridge's communication systems. Why what, Commander? Why are you helping us? We attacked you. We threatened to kill your people and steal your cargo. We're pirates, murderers, thieves. Why would you show us mercy? There was a long pause before Chon answered, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that suggested careful consideration. Because that's what humans do, Commander Vorthik. We believe that every intelligent being has the potential to grow, to change, to become something better than what they were. Your past actions don't have to define your future choices. The holographic display shifted, showing not schematics of weapons or tactical formations, but images of human colonies, cities, and families. Children playing in parks. Scientists working together in laboratories. Artists creating beautiful sculptures and paintings. Engineers building structures that reach toward the stars. This is what we're protecting, Chun said quietly. Not just human lives, but the idea that civilization can exist without constant conflict. That different species can work together instead of preying on each other. That strength should be used to build rather than destroy. Vorthik found himself studying the images with growing fascination. He had spent decades thinking of humans as weak because they preferred diplomacy to warfare. But looking at their cities, their art, their evident joy in simply existing, he began to understand a different kind of strength. These were beings who had chosen to create beauty in a universe that seemed designed for conflict. Your people have achieved something remarkable, he admitted reluctantly. But the galaxy is a dangerous place. Not everyone will be impressed by your mercy. We're aware of that, Chun replied. That's why we developed weapons like the ones you've just experienced. Humans learned long ago that sometimes you have to be prepared for war in order to preserve peace. The difference is that we use our strength to protect rather than to conquer. The U's Phantom began to move closer to Vorthic's flagship, its quantum-shifted hull stabilizing into normal space. As it approached, the Zalthan commander could see that the ship's weapons were powering down, though the surrounding drones maintained their protective formation. Commander Vorthic, Chun continued, I'm going to make you an offer. Your fleet is completely at our mercy. We could destroy every one of your ships without taking a single casualty. Instead, I'm prepared to let you leave on 3 conditions. Vorthic straightened in his command chair, his military training overriding his fear. What conditions? First, you will cease all attacks on civilian shipping in this sector. The piracy ends today. Second, you will deliver the cultural exchange, devices we've given you to other Zalthan fleets and settlements. Let your people decide for themselves whether they want to continue the cycle of violence. And third, the pause stretched long enough that Vorthic began to wonder if the communication system had malfunctioned. Third, if you ever encounter other humans in distress, you will render whatever assistance you can provide. Not because we're forcing you to, but because you've chosen to become something better than a predator. The bridge fell silent as Vorthic considered the offer. Around him, his crew waited for his decision, their expressions showing mixtures of fear, hope, and confusion. They had entered this battle as confident hunters, and found themselves outmatched by prey that had turned into protectors. And if I refuse, he asked, then we disable your ships, rescue your crews, and turn you over to the Galactic Peacekeepers for trial. Chun replied matter-of-factly. Your people will live, but they'll spend the next several years in rehabilitation centers learning about the consequences of piracy. The choice is yours, Commander. Vorthic looked around his bridge one more time, seeing his crew's faces in a new light. These were warriors who had followed him into battle, trusting his leadership and tactical skills. He had led them into what should have been certain victory, and instead delivered them into the hands of enemies, who were offering mercy they didn't deserve. But perhaps that was exactly the point. Perhaps mercy wasn't something that had to be deserved. Perhaps it was something that civilized beings offered because they chose to see potential rather than just present reality. I accept your conditions, he said finally, his voice carrying across the bridge and through the communication channels to every ship in both fleets. The effect was immediate. The human drones began moving away from the Zalthan ships, their aggressive formations dissolving into peaceful escort patterns. The U's ghost began shifting back to its original configuration, the psychological impact of its transformation having served its purpose. Excellent, Chun said, and Vorthic could hear genuine pleasure in her voice. Your crews are free to examine the cultural exchange devices at their leisure. You'll find that human perspectives on art, science, and philosophy might be quite different from what you've experienced before. As if summoned by her words, Vorthic's science officer approached his command chair with one of the small devices in his clawed hands. Commander, the preliminary scans are remarkable. The information density exceeds anything in our databases. There are mathematical proofs here that could revolutionize our understanding of quantum mechanics. Mathematics that led to weapons capable of manipulating reality itself, Vorthic observed. Yes, sir. But also mathematics that led to medical techniques, environmental restoration methods, and architectural designs that maximize both efficiency and aesthetic beauty. It's like they developed their science to enhance life rather than just to wage war. Captain Chun's voice came over the communication system one final time. Commander Vorthic, Your fleet is free to depart whenever you're ready. The Nexus shipping lane will remain under human protection, but you and your people are welcome to establish legitimate trade relationships if you're interested in a different path forward. Vorthik stood from his command chair and walked to the main view screen, looking out at the human convoy that had so thoroughly outmaneuvered his fleet. The cargo ships were resuming their original course, the escort vessels taking up protective positions that somehow managed to look both vigilant and peaceful. "Signal the fleet," he commanded. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. We're returning to Zalfin space." "Commander," Grix asked quietly, "what do we tell the Brotherhood about what happened here?" Vorthik considered the question while studying the small cultural exchange device his science officer had handed him. Inside this simple container was access to an entire civilization's accumulated knowledge, freely given to former enemies without any expectation of payment or reciprocation. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that we encountered something more dangerous than any weapon system. We encountered a species that chooses to see the best in others, even when those others have given them every reason to see the worst. And we let them decide what they want to do with that information." As the Zalfin fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the human convoy to continue its peaceful journey, Vorthik settled back into his command chair with the cultural exchange device in his hands. For the first time in years, he found himself curious about something other than the next target, the next prize, the next battle. He found himself curious about what it might feel like to build something instead of destroying it. And in the Siege, back of his mind, a small voice wondered if it might be possible for even an old pirate to learn new ways of thinking about the universe and his place in it. Behind them, the human convoy continued on its way, protected by guardians who preferred to remain silent until the moment they were needed. And in that silence, the seeds of change began to grow, spreading through quantum communication networks and cultural exchange programs toward a future where strength and mercy might finally learn to coexist. The humans had won more than just a battle. They had demonstrated that true victory didn't require the destruction of one's enemies. Sometimes it only required showing them a better way to live. Asterisk.